Okay, we're going to cover March 29th material on morphophonology. I'm going to apologize in advance because this room has a lot of echo and I haven't been able to put up anything on the walls yet to stop it. So we are in for an echoey end to the course. So, morphophonology. We've done a lot of morphophonology so far in this course, mainly with like allomorphs. And we've seen a little bit in some of the previous problems, so things like affix orderings and affix levels we will revisit. We'll talk about the tiers of a word today, so not only from the morpheme side, but from the sound side as well. And then we'll briefly cover reduplication. I'm going to show you how it works, and then on the take home, you'll have a problem where you get to work a little bit more with it. Then tomorrow's material, talk about quiz 4, obviously, and then we'll do McCarthy and Prince. So if you remember, we did this problem towards the beginning of the course about affix, and some of you came up with reasons as to why there are different classes. But the only thing you had to do was discover that there was some order. So for example, ism is considered a class 2 affix, Ian is a 1, and then when you do something close to the root, the 1s have to come before the 2s. Now, let's figure out what is actually happening here with an explanation and what other affixes fit into these categories. So we have our data set up there to remind ourselves, but really what's interesting is the affixes. So let's take a look. And remember, ism is level 2 and Ian is level 1. So level 1 affixes, they tend to have a certain origin, actually. So they tend to come from Latin or Romantic languages, which is interesting. And almost all of them change stress. So these are like the characteristics of level 1 affixes. So grammar, we see stressed on that first syllable, but grammarian, we have this stress change to the second syllable. Reparable or repairable, depending on how you want to pronounce this. Let's go with repairable. And we can see a change to irreparable. So rep is being stressed here. We can see a stress change. Now, this is one of those cases with repairable or reparable. People will say in both ways. Reparable is a lot more British than Canadian English. But if you're someone who says reparable and you put ear in front of it, you're not going to get a stress change for you. But these affixes are determined more from the population rather than individual speakers. So level 2 affixes, they tend to be of Germanic origin, and these do not change stress. So grammar, gram is the first syllable. Grammarism, we still have that first initial stress. Revocable, revoke is stressed, and unrevocable, revoke still has stress. Unrevocable is how I should say that to make it sound better. You can put stress on, that's fine. You can say it's unrevocable, and you can really emphasize that. But if you're not doing that emphasis, you get unrevocable, same pronunciation. The level 2 affixes don't change stress, and level 1 affixes do. So let's think about a couple of these. You can try these yourselves, whether it changes stress or not. So 1 is change, and 2 is the same. So real to reality. Real to reality. There is a stress change there. That is a type 1 affix. Us. Danger. Dangerous. The stress does not change. That is youth. Stress on youth. Youthful. Stress on youth again. Not change. Explode. Explode is getting that stress. Explosive. Oh, explode still gets that stress. Even though we have some morphophonology happening here, the D is changing to an S, what we're concerned with is the fact that we have a stress staying in the same spot. This is likely some other phonological process happening, like some weakening of the consonant to the fricative. This is unrelated. Then there's two Y suffixes, so E1 and E2. So photograph, photo stress, photography. Oh, the O is getting stressed. So I should really say this is photograph versus photography. That's a level 1 affix. And panic, panic to panicky. That one does not change. So we have a level 2 affix. As we can see here, even though two things may look the same, they can behave differently and apply differently and have different meanings. So the E in photography is not the same meaning as the E in panic. They have different meanings, so the fact that they behave differently is not weird. So how do we do this? If we have two levels of affixes and we're forming words, we know that the ones have to come closer to the root than the twos. So this must mean that there's like stages of application. Because if we can never get something like this, what that means is that there's some process that's doing one affix first. And then attached to that are some two affixes afterwards. So we can say that this is, my mic stand just came right out. We can say that this is some sort of level ordering. In other words, what this means is that there are stages of morphology and phonology that bounce back and forth. So we have some underlying form, let's say it's root X, it goes into the morphology. It picks up its level 1 affixes. It goes to the phonology, does whatever stress changes have to be done, and then it goes into level 2, picks up more affixes, does more phonology, and the process repeats until you have a completed word. Now, level 1 doesn't just affix 1, it just stage 1 of the operations, but because we have affixes 1 and 2, we can use this diagram to make it a little bit more concrete. Then after all the morphology and phonology has been done, you get your surface form, you get your root. And that's either going to be grammatical or it's going to be ungrammatical. So to see this in action, I took one of the things from the textbook so we can see this. So for example, you have the word nation. And we're trying to get to national. So we can do two different operations. So we can do morphology first. So we can add this ul suffix. We can do some shortening of the vowel itself. So instead of a, it becomes ah. In other words, this diphthong is becoming undiphthongized. And we get our final form. With something like debate acidity, let's see acidity, because here we have a stress change. So this is a really good talk of a level 1 affix. So we start with acid at the top. We add ity in our morphology. And then we do our stress change. So instead of acidity, weird, we say acidity. So we do this stress change in level 1. We go to the next stage, and now these phonological processes happening aren't related to word meaning. They're simply just regular phonological processes that would apply to any word. So we have some flapping in the middle to change our D's and T's to flap, so acidity, because of the way that stress is assigned here. The other ones do similar patterns. So we can see the iv suffix in level 1 morphology happening above. You can see the morphology happening down below. Now, there are some cases where we have level 1 affixes that don't change. We're not going to talk really about those. But one of the big questions in level ordering, and this is probably something that you have when you see something like trisyllabic shortening, what is that? Our example was a going to a. And like, how is this a level 1 process? How does this make it a level 1 affix? So it's not, like I said, it's not always just about stress, but that is the main mechanism behind it. So we're not really going to worry too much about these cases or about how level ordering is created. It's so let's see the process. Let's understand what morphologists think is happening. Go from a base form, we do a bunch of morphology and phonology interactions, and we get an output. Not just all morphology at once, all phonology at once. So yeah, the good and the bad. Like we said, it's really good that we can put morphology and phonology together in a way that makes sense. And for concatenative processes where we're adding affixes, this is fantastic. Problem with level ordering is that it's rule based when we add affixes. So when we have these non-concatenative processes happening, let's say there's something in the morphology that changes the inside of the word, we can't really do this with the affix ordering because the way that the morphology works is that it wants something added. So we could add a zero suffix and change the inside of the word afterwards in the phonology. But this isn't a very convincing explanation to a lot of people. A lot of people do not like these zero affixes. So that's not going to work for those people. There are also a couple cases I said we never see. And the real word is almost never. But there are languages where you can do something where you have X and a level 2 after a level 1. With level ordering, this doesn't make sense because level ordering is very strict about how it goes through the sequence. And the whole point of level ordering is to get level 1 affixes first. So if we get this case, then suddenly level ordering isn't nice with it. Because how can it do a level 1 affix way later in the sequence when level 1 affixes are at the beginning? So what's happening there? Who knows? Also, what's really interesting is that we don't actually need this rule ordering to explain these affix classes. We can actually do it with productivity. So you can use productive data about these affixes to explain the orderings here. That's all you need. You don't need this complex rule ordering. Now, a lot of people won't like that because we know there are phonological processes. We know there's morphological processes. We know there's difference. So to put it all down and say, oh, it's a statistical difference in productivity, it doesn't make a lot of the, it's not going to make a lot of people happy because there's no linguistic explanation. There's no reason, I should say. So moving on from that, we are going to take a look at word hierarchies and talk more about sound. So in this course, we've been focusing mainly on the word and morphology tier. So this is the word aging. And as you see with the word age, we're doing it with sound now. So age is a verb, to age. And then it gets the ing suffix, which is an affix to make the verb aging. But on the other side, these sounds also have a sound structure that doesn't always correlate directly with the word structure. So the very bottom is what's called the prosodic word. So this is like the thing that assigns primary stress. So which syllable in a word gets primary stress, which foot in the word gets primary stress, that's the prosodic word. What the foot tier does is the foot tier takes two syllables and it says one of these are going to get stressed. It's not about primary or secondary stress, it's just one syllable is stressed. So in a word like aging, the foot is giving stress to that first syllable. And then what the prosodic word is saying is this foot gets primary stress. So this stress syllable ends up being primary stress. This is only a two-syllable word, so we can't see anything exciting here, but aging, that's the primary stress. Okay, once we get from the syllable tier, we get into the CV tier. This is where all sounds are represented by C's and B's, either consonants or vowels. So A is a vowel, and then J is a consonant, A is a vowel, and N is a consonant. When we take a look at syllable formation compared to word formation, Jing is its own syllable, but this J in Jing is part of the word age. So the morphological tier, the word tier, doesn't align completely with the sound tier. These are two separate things. So we can express these all on one slide. So let's talk about each tier and then we'll do some practice drawing of the whole thing just to get comfortable with it. See how this works with morphology. So the CV tier can be used for its own explanations. Like it can tell us about root and patterns, which we'll see in the presentation this week, the final class. It can account for reduplication and also tells us how small words can be. So we think in phonology usually of like the syllable as being this really powerful tool that can explain a lot of things. A lot of processes happen to the syllables. And it's true with the CV tier. So in terms of explanation and talking about processes, the CV tier is just as powerful as the syllable, although it might not seem as much of a concrete unit in your head, because normally we don't think of things in terms of CVs. We think of things in terms of the syllables and group sounds together. So let's see how we can use the CV tier to talk about lengthening. So we have two words, siga and siga. So we can see that the E is lengthened here. And these have two different meanings. So one is to sow or plant, the other one is to smear or paint. Now we can say that each of these words have what's called a CV template. So the sow or plant siga is a C, V, C, V. And all of the C's align with the C's, V's with the V's. So they just go one to one. We have to assign them left to right. That's the order, that's the rules for a template. But what about this case with smear or paint with a long E? This is actually not the same CV template. Instead, this is a CVV, CV template. So we have a double vowel there. Now, when we try to link these up, what happens? Well, we get the V to the E, and suddenly this V needs to attach to the next thing. But that's not a vowel, so that cannot attach to the G. Instead, it's being forced to attach to the same E, giving us basically a double E, and that's what's creating that length. Then the rest is assigned as normal. So we can explain lengthening in base forms with different CV templates. Now, let's take a look at this. So I'm giving you an underlying form, and we're getting an output. So we start with ba, a, la, ba, and in the end, we get be, la, ba. Okay, so what's happening here? What's happening to our CV template? Well, we start off with a very nice CV template that aligns perfectly. But the output is be, la, ba. So what's happening here is we go through this process of called delinking and spreading. So what we're going to do is we delink ah from the first vowel. So we're basically saying the first vowel is and now we have a problem because we have to get this vowel to connect to something. So what do? Well, we spread it to the nearby vowel, causing this a to become lengthened. And because we delinked the ah from the vowel, this ah now disappears and we end up with be, laba. So this is how this change can be described with a CV template. So yeah, so we do have a bit of a rule here in that the first vowel has to like either be gone or it just has to change. It just cannot be a vowel. So we can see this in this next example, which is a little bit different. Okay, so here we have 2a laba, but instead of just a B, sorry, just a long E, we get this W here. So the U isn't being completely deleted. Now, there's one thing I have to explain here because not all of us have taken phonology, and that is that the sounds E and Y and the sounds U and W are phonologically very, very similar. There's not really a feature that can be used to separate these. So you can do this by holding a Y or W in your mouth for a few seconds. Ooh, notice how it turns into an oo if I hold it too long. Yee, it turns into an E if I hold it too long. That's because the Y and W are gotten from that mouth movement while you're producing the sound. So these two are, close to identical. So the fact that the U changes to a W here is not surprising if you know that information. So let's lay out our CV tier. CVV, CV, CV, do our initial connections. And now we're going to do some spreading and delinking. So our first rule says delink that first vowel, and we'll take the V and spread it to the E. Sorry, to the A. Now, okay, now how do we get a W? Well, in our previous analysis, the ah had to be deleted because it couldn't get any C or V. Because ah, if you think of the vowel space, is like way down there. It is nowhere near the roof of your mouth. compared to like E or U, which is very high, and you get those sounds. So we can't turn ah into a consonant. It's just too far. U on the other hand, like we said, U and W are so close. So we can actually give some consonant-like features to U through spreading. And now the U has become more consonant-like. It becomes more like a semi-vowel. So that's how we get that W there. Get twe lava. So the A is lengthened because the A has two V's on it. And the U can still exist because we gave it some C-ness. So the C still attaches to the T, but it's spread over because it wants to help. So a much more in-depth explanation of all of this can be found in Ling 321. We're just sort of doing the minimum here to get through this, but hopefully you're able to follow along with that and understand why the U was savable, but the A was not. So just to put it out there, if we were to have another word with E, we could do the same thing and get like che out of it, because E can also be saved. Okay, now we're going to move on to the syllable tier. I keep doing this is the most scuffed video I've ever made. Oh, I'm just trying to adjust it. Okay. So we don't need to worry too much about the actual structure of a syllable. What we need to know is that all syllables must contain a nucleus, and that onsets like to be as big as possible. So every syllable has to have what's called a rhyme and a nucleus. These are required. Everything else is optional with a star. Optional being that onsets like to have more things in them, and codas really don't want to have anything unless they have to. So if you have a word like, say, stream, you could take stra, your consonants as the onset. Nucleus always centers around the vowel, so E, and then our coda has to take M because there's no other place to put M. So this is the structure of a syllable. And we're going to think about syllables and CV templates to answer this problem. So in English, we shorten names to make nicknames. So we can change Carolyn to Carrie or Care. We can change Susan to Sue, Tyler to Ty, Christopher to Chris, Stephanie to Steph or Steffi, Catherine to Kathy or Katie. Now, I'm going to transcribe most of these. So there's Carrie and there's Care. There's Sue. That's a long vowel when you say it normally. Ty, Chris, Steph. So I'll do the short one here. Steffi is longer. Catherine goes to Kathy or Katie, so we can do Kathy, or we can do Katie. Okay. So what is the constraint for English names? What's the shortest they can be? And if we just take a look at letters, I, that's 2 letters. But letters aren't going to be good enough for here. Because what if we wanted to change it to maybe not Ty, but to Ta? Could you nickname Ty as Ta? Ta? Or nickname Ty as Ti? Could any nickname be Ti? What about in the case of Carolyn going to Care? Could we say, hey, Ke? No, it's not good. What about Sue? Hey, Sue. Hey, Sue. 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 I do Sue. Hey, Sue. Hey, Sue. Not in English. That doesn't sound okay. So what we notice is that, okay, we have a case with 2 sounds, 2 sounds, 2 sounds, 2 sounds, but there's a difference in the quality of the vowels here. So if you have just a consonant and a vowel, that is a tense vowel. That is oo. That is a long vowel. I, diphthong, a little bit longer. In the terms of carry, going to care, we don't have a long vowel, but we do have a consonant there. So if we think about how the syllables have to work, what we need is a consonant in its onset, and then we need a nucleus to be heavy. We need a nucleus to be long or have 2 vowels, or at the very least, have some other consonant after the vowel. So There is a minimum sound requirement for nicknames, and that is 3 sounds, but the vowel can double if it's a heavy vowel. So if it's not lax. So interesting constraint on nicknames. We can see how phonology is directly influencing word creation. Oh, delete it. So when we get up to the foot of prosodic words here, let's just put it back. Why not? I already did it. So that example actually worked that well for me. So get rid of it in this case. So let's start from fresh. A foot is always going to be connected to either 2 syllables or 1 syllable, or in very rare cases, 3 syllables, but we won't see this one. So a foot has to assign stress. So if it has only 1 syllable, that syllable has to get stress. But if it has 2 syllables, sometimes the right will be stressed, sometimes the left will be. This is why in words we get this alternating stress pattern. Refrigerator. Because we have a bunch of feet side by side, and only one of them gets stressed. So let's say it's like this. And then we get a prosodic word, and it connects to multiple feet. So let's say we have a 6-syllable word, like this. And let's say stress is going to the left side of each foot. What the prosodic word is doing is it's saying which foot gets primary stress and which ones get secondary stress. So let's say it gives the left foot primary stress. This means the first syllable has primary stress, so it's the strongest, and these other 2 syllables get secondary stress. So it's like, I can't think of a word that has this pattern right off the top of my head, but I could kind of force it. It's like if I said recombobulation. 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 That's not how you say it, but recombobulation. Recombobulation. Okay, here we go. We can actually change this. Let's make this the real word. Recombobulation. Recombobulation. That last syllable gets primary stress, so we could assign it like that. This is not something you have to do. You just have to be able to understand what it looks like. And save those questions for 321. Okay, so we're going to do a whole hierarchy for education professor. So morphological tier, sound tier, all that. So let's transcribe it. Education professor. Okay, so we have a CV tier, so VC, 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 VC. Oh, R is VC. Sorry, I'm doing it upside down because putting morphology on the top when I do these. So we're not going to worry too much about heavy syllables here. We're just going to do it straight to the ending here, so we won't have any double V's. Okay, now I have to do syllables. So what we can do is we can put a syllable right above every single vowel. And now I'll show you how we can do this process to determine what goes in a coda. So what we do is we start at each syllable and we ask ourselves, to the left, how many consonants can start at the beginning of a word? Well, there's no consonant to the left, so that syllable is done. Move to the second one. Ask ourselves, can we start a word in English? Je. The answer is yes, so we can include that in our syllable. What about the next syllable with k? Can we start a word with k? Yes. What about the next syllable, sh? Can we start a word with sh? Yes. Okay, what's more interesting is this next pair. So we're taking a look at this syllable. We have NPO. So are all of these in the onset? We have to ask ourselves, can we start a word with NPR in English? No, cannot. So we know that the N is not going to be in that syllable we're looking at. It's going to be in the previous one. What about this next one? Professor. So O, we have pr. Can we start a word with pr? Yeah, price, professor. So both of these consonants can be in that syllable. Let me just line up a little bit nicer. Okay, then we can do the rest for the next. So can begin a word, S can begin a word, and R has no other syllable to the right, so it has to go in the coda there. Okay, so we've done all that. Now we're going to think about stress. Education, professor. So we can do foot assignment from left to right, right to left. In 321, we care a little bit more about how you do this. Just trying to showcase how we can do feet to get stress. So whether this is the right way or not, let's not worry too much about that. So education, okay. So K is definitely getting stress, and it's definitely getting primary stress. Education, professor. Even in the whole compound, K is the strongest one. We'll connect all of our other feet to this prosodic word. Now we just have to figure out secondary stress. So education, professor. The key is that stress alternates. So if one is right-footed, all of them will be. So education, professor. Oh, that doesn't actually work here because our foot boundary is going across words. So sometimes that actually causes a problem, even if it's a compound. So what we could do is we could revise this or we could continue. I'm going to revise it just for the sake of linguistic exploration at this point. Although that means that we have to do a whole 2 foot each for each one of these ones. So sure, why not? We found an issue. So let's explore that. Let's see what we do when we find an issue. So put these together as feet. Okay, so this is left to right assignment. This sounds a little bit better. Education, that's still getting primary stress. And then professor. That is getting stress in this case. And this last syllable, it might be extrametrical, it might not get stress, but let's not worry too much about that. Okay, so this is that bit. Now at the top, we have to figure out how to do, sorry, I have to connect this last one to the prosodic word. At the top, we have to figure out what our categories are. So education in this case would be noun, professor in this case, noun, and these come together to form a compound noun. So that's how we could do a hierarchy for education professor. I give you a very big word just for practice, but the reality is that if you were to do this, which you won't, I would not give you a word this big. Okay, so the last thing to talk about is reduplication. And we talked about reduplication already. I just want to talk about a special case by Borsellino and McCarthy and what they said, talking about McCarthy this week. So what McCarthy said about reduplication is that it's actually just a normal affix, but the affix is underspecified, meaning that instead of English getting something like, say, S or plural, it's more just that it's a V. It just doesn't have a sound associated with it, but it has a template, and it borrows sounds from the word. So if we take a look at tak, taki, and tak, taki, what we're actually saying here is that this is not like just copying some of the word. This is an actual CVC suffix that attaches to taki. And if we draw a CV template for this, so CVC, that's being attached to a CV, CCV template. So TAK is long and short. So this is sort of what the original template looks like. Then when it borrows sounds, it gets its sounds associated with those underspecified affixes. It does so in order. So this links to the first consonant, this links to the first vowel, and this links to the other consonant. And that is how it's getting its sound for reduplication. So this isn't some fancy process. This is just regular affixation, except the affix doesn't have specific sounds in it. Now, how does the same thing apply to oof-oof-oo? I didn't talk about this in class. I'm going to talk about it in class tomorrow, because actually we can do the same thing. So as a hint, before we talk about it, there's no C at the beginning of oof-oo. So what are we going to do with it? All right, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you know how to contact me, and I'll see you tomorrow.